I feel so fortunate that today we have Dr. Carmen Ayala, State Superintendent. So excited she's here. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're going to cross our fingers that she can provide the opening remarks, because Dr. Ayala is someone I look up to who has diligently worked towards equity in education, and especially for English learners. We also have Marisa de la Torre, who's a senior researcher at the University of Chicago, Consortium on School Research, who's brought such an important spotlight to ELs in Chicago. And we also have Chief Executive Officer of Chicago Public Schools, Pedro Martinez, a believer in dual language education. Silvia Puente, CEO and President of the Latino Policy Forum, a lifelong advocate for underrepresented communities. And I've got my forum team, Erika Mendez and Rosario Hernandez. This today would not be possible without their support. And for all of you attending today, we thank you so much for being here. Please put questions, concerns in the chat. We're going to have a live Q&A at the end, and we will also culminate with polling. So I am praying, I'm crossing my fingers that the wonderful Dr. Carmen Ayala is able to speak. We had some technological issues. I'm wondering, Carmen, if she is able. We still cannot hear her, can we? Yikes. And we all want to hear from Dr. Ayala. She is a lifelong advocate of equity and English learners. So I want to cry a little that you can't speak right now. What we'll do is maybe troubleshoot with Carmen and try some call-in options. Marisa, can I have you go ahead and start? Then we'll have Pedro follow. So let's go ahead. Marisa, do you want to share your screen? And we can start just with the study findings.
Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you everybody for being here. We are really excited to share with you highlights of the study that we just published a few weeks ago. We are focusing on English learners in Chicago public schools. These are the students from whom we expect a lot, not only mastering the content of the classes, but also learning English language. So we focus on this study in the pre-K and early grade years, and why we do that. What you can see here is a graph of the number of EL students in CPS in a particular year by different grades. And what you can see is the largest numbers of ELs happen to be in kindergarten all the way to third grade. As the students master the content of English language, they become not classified as English language anymore. That's why you start to see that decline after the fourth grade. So we have a large population of students in the early grades that are ELs. They also represent a large proportion of ELs in CPS, like a third of all kindergarten students in CPS are English language learning. So it's a large population of students that need to master the English language. The way English students are identified as English learners, when they enroll in the school, parents or guardians take this home language survey. It's just a couple of questions. Is a language other than English is spoken at home, and does the student speak another language at home? If they answer yes to any of these two questions, the student is screened within 30 days of enrollment to see what is their level of English language and whether they can actually attend, sit in the classes, being able to follow what is being taught. If students score in that screener assessment below a certain level identified by the state, then the student is identified as EL. Every year after that, the students are being tested for starting in kindergarten. In this test called Access around February, where different domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing are being assessed to determine whether they are mastering English language skills. Once they reach a threshold established by the state, students are no longer classified as English language learners. It usually takes 5 to 7 years, prior research has established, to master the academic English being tested by these assessments. So in this study, we had two main questions. The first one is, what are the factors associated with the stronger outcomes for ELs in pre-K and early grades? It's a particularly good time to intervene if we see any problems with the students in the early grades. We know that that really puts the students in a better path to success when we intervene early. And then the second question we had is, to what extent can we actually identify ELs that will benefit from additional support, right? If we know what are supports that might benefit them, can we identify them early so that we can support them better and put them in a better path? This study only focuses on ELs. We had roughly between 14 and 16,000 students included in the study. One's focused on the pre-K year, the other one focuses on students from kindergarten all the way to 3rd grade. In CPS, 85% of EL students are Spanish speakers, and the rest speak around 70 different languages. Most of the ELs in CPS are receiving free or reduced price lunch. So first, what are the factors associated with the stronger outcomes? I want to highlight two main findings. The first one is related to preschool. So enrollment in preschool, especially when preschool is a full day program, was associated with the stronger learning outcomes and attendance for ELs. I want to say first that when we talk about preschool, is preschool in a CPS school, right? So we don't have data to talk about CBOs, community-based organizations, or private pre-K. So whenever we say anything about preschool, it's about preschool in a CPS school. Just to give you an idea of what a difference it makes to attend a full day pre-K, we see here a test. There is a test being given in the fall of kindergarten that really assesses the early reading skills of the students. So we see if they attend half-day pre-K, 39% of the students are proficient, measured by this test, while full-day pre-K, when we compare students that are similar in many different characteristics, and the only difference is whether they attended half-day or a full day, we see a 10 percentage point difference for those students that attend a full day. So it seems to be a large difference in the percent of the students being proficient. But it's not only the difference that it makes early on, but we still see benefits associated with attending a preschool, even in 3rd grade. Even after 4 years of attending pre-K, we see benefits. And we see benefits not only in whether they acquire English skills, but we see it in attendance, we see it in their grades that they get in reading and math classes, and we see it in the standardized scores. So it really, we see a big effects, big association in many different outcomes. The second big finding is around students who receive bilingual services. They have a stronger attendance and academic outcomes. When the students enroll in CPS, they can actually, even if they are identified as ELs, they can refuse services. They are still tested every year by Access to determine whether they are making progress in their English language skills. But we see that 3% of families or students in CPS refuse services when they enroll in CPS. And it's true that sometimes we see that students, when we look at whether they are mastering English, we see their scores being higher in kindergarten. But by the 3rd grade, that advantage seems to have vanished. So students that receive bilingual education services are more likely to demonstrate English proficiency by 3rd grade compared to students that refuse bilingual services. So you see there the difference. But it's not only in English proficiency that we see differences. Students that receive bilingual services have advantage in terms we see better attendance across different grades. We see math and reading standardized test scores much higher in 3rd grade, as well as grades in their classes. So receiving bilingual services seems to benefit the students in many different dimensions and help them acquire the knowledge that they need in their classes. Now moving on to the second question that we were trying to answer is like, can we identify students that will need additional support or different strategies? We found two things. Remember I said at the beginning that the students are being screened within 30 days of enrollment to determine the English proficiency. So that test that the students take really early on is predictive for future outcome. And students with low levels of English proficiency tended to have lower grades and test performance. This is an example of what happened with the standardized test that the students take in third grade. The bars on the left is based on reading scores. The bars on the right is based on math scores. So that screener test, the bar on the left, what is labeled entering is like the lowest level measured by the screener. The bar on the right, the lighter green expanding, is the highest level before students are being proficient. And these are the average scores in the standardized test. What you see is that students in the entering level score around the 32nd percentile in a national distribution of the students, while the students that were in the expanding level at the beginning of kindergarten score in the 55th percentile on the national distribution. So we see big differences associated with where the students were when they enter kindergarten. And those differences also exist when we see the math scores, which is the bars on the right, but they are less than what we see in reading. So we see much more differences in reading. But it's also true that we see this screener data associated with the access test scores at the end of third grade. And we also see it in the classes that they get, the grades that they get in their classes in third grade. So it's also associated with many different outcomes, not just with whether they master English skills. And finally, the fourth finding is about the students' ears with identified disabilities. And what we found is that they have lower attendance and a harder time acquiring English skills. Around 12% of ears in kindergarten are also identified with a disability. But one thing that I want to highlight is even though they have a harder time, they are still making progress when we look at the English language skills. The graph at the top represents the composite scores in the access test that is measuring the English proficiency. In kindergarten, those are the green bars. The one at the bottom is what's measured in the third grade. Each bar represents a different group of students. The one at the top is students without identified disability, followed by development and delay. For example, that's the largest group among the students that are identified with disability. And what you see is like everybody make progress from kindergarten to third grade. It's just that students with identified disabilities do it at a slower pace. So just to conclude, I highlighted a few circumstances where we see ES with stronger outcomes in pre-K and the early grades. Some of those are exposure to pre-K, especially when that's school day, and also when they receive bilingual education services. We also have learned from the study that students benefit from additional support are those with low initial English skills and those with disabilities. So we now know that we could actually offer supports to students early on to put them in a better path of success. And especially we can think of interventions that will help them with reading, which because we saw a big difference in that area. And especially for students with identified disability, we could think of interventions to really address the low attendance. Thank you so much for your attention. And now we are going to hear from Pedro Martinez, CEO of the Chicago Public Schools.
Thank you, Marisa. Just to keep us on our toes, Pedro had to step out for a bit. So I am going to go next. This is just to keep everything exciting for you all. So I'll go ahead and share state level implications of this study. And then we can cross our fingers that Carmen Ayala's speaker is working and we can hear from her, and then we'll have some interactive Q&A. Thanks everyone so much. So the purpose really of what I'll talk about briefly is to think about, as the state and nation look to expand preschool, how can we take this research that Marisa just talked about to influence policy and practice to benefit English learners? We all know there's been a tremendous growth in English learners across the US, but in most states, students aren't identified as English learners until kindergarten, even first grade. A lot of folks don't know Illinois is one of the few states that requires English learner services as early as age 3. And at the same time, research and policy have given great attention to the importance of early childhood, especially preschool, beginning at age 3. So as Illinois and even the nation consider expansion of preschool services, it's so timely that we have this study from University of Chicago about ELs in the early years. Illinois is a leader. We have the 4th largest concentration of ELs of any state in the nation. But I want us to be really careful to situate this study within the Illinois policy context. As Marisa talked about, we offer a screener. We conduct a screener of English language proficiency within the first 30 days of enrollment by a licensed bilingual educator. We require home language and ESL instruction. We require a licensed teacher with a bilingual ESL endorsement and specialized professional development. And we have a long history of the State Board of Education providing oversight and accountability for EL programs. We've also had a long-standing challenge to implementation, no secret, and that is the shortage of qualified bilingual educators. And I also just want to pause for a moment about the potential lack of English learner services in early childhood programs. As Marisa talked about, there's a long-term detrimental impact when parents refuse services. But let's keep in mind the array of places where a child can receive preschool services. Because also detrimental is if a child attends a preschool where services are not available. That net result could be the same, that child is immersed in English-only programs. So given what we know from this extensive research, that English learner services matter in the preschool years, we need to ask ourselves if quality is the same across programs. And key to quality is native language and ESL instruction by a licensed teacher. We at the forum have begun to develop recommendations for policy geared toward decision makers, early childhood governance structures, and practice geared toward educators and preschool providers. So the first is really around access, that policymakers, district leaders expand and prioritize access for English learners beginning at age 3 for 2 years of full-day preschool. But it's not just any preschool. It's preschool customized to meet their needs. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And so as we think about expansion in our state, we want to have oversight to ensure the program complies with Illinois and federal law regarding English learner services and instruction, because this is quality. And to do this, as I mentioned, we're going to need to see increased investments in recruiting and retaining a bilingual educator workforce that prepares young ELs from preschool to 3rd grade. Now for practice, this is interesting. The research shows, as Marisa talked about, new significance about the screener data that was not known before. And we're talking about the pre-IPT oral English language proficiency test that really shows how much language a child has been exposed to. So we're putting out a critical question. How can educators and preschool provider capacity be enhanced to both understand the screener data and take action to serve young ELs before kindergarten? So the recommendation that we're thinking about is that local school leaders and preschool providers develop a system of student identification for ELs who score in that lowest category. And as Marisa talked about, there's a good amount of kids that are scoring in that lowest category. And that these students be identified to receive additional language instruction to ensure that they're kindergarten ready. And I've had some important preliminary conversations with folks who say, hey, this could even be a way to prioritize who gets seats in preschool. Parents, now this could be really exciting. It's something we believe a lot in at the forum. What do parents of English learners need to know about what matters for their child's long-term educational success? We know parents of ELs have a variety of needs when deciding on preschool programs. They're thinking about flexible scheduling, distance to the program, extended day, wraparound services. They might not be thinking about language instruction for their child. So this has to be a part of enrollment. District leaders and preschool providers must inform parents and caregivers of the research that demonstrates the long-term benefits of bilingual ESL early childhood programs. This means they know what this research says, that full day pre-K beginning at age 3 that offers English learner services is beneficial for long-term academic success. They need to know there's a detrimental impact if they refuse services. And also included in here is that if an English learner has special needs, parents must be made aware of their right to both a licensed bilingual and special education teachers. They don't have to choose. Finally, district leaders and preschool providers must provide additional supports and language instruction to English learners who have an identified disability. Educational leaders should make every effort to provide special education services that also follow policies regarding English learners. The additional services and instruction should aim to improve, as Marisa talked about, really focus on improving these children's attendance. So now I am going to turn it over to all of you to think about Q&A. I actually first, Erika, who's going to be moderating the Q&A, can we try one more time to see if the wonderful and incredibly patient Dr. Carmen Ayala is able, if we're able to hear her? Everyone cross your fingers, please. Let's see if she is able to unmute and we can actually hear her. Dr. Ayala, are you able? Can we cross our fingers? We can hear you. This is amazing.
Magic. Wow. Technology. Interesting. I think I was on different places in Zoom with participant access or something like that, but I'm so glad we were able to figure it out. Can you hear me okay? Wow. Good morning, everyone. I am just so thrilled to have figured out the technology and gotten through that web, but more importantly, to be able to participate in what I consider to be such an important discussion. I'm a former kindergarten teacher. I don't know if some of you know that or not. And I'm a former director of bilingual services for what was then the 4th largest EL program in the state of Illinois. I think it's the 4th or 5th currently. Currently, I'm a grandmother of 2 little girls, a preschooler and a 1st grader. And so making sure that we have the proper and appropriate education services for our youngest Latino students and English learners is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I was in the classroom 11 years, 6 of those years I spent in kindergarten. So when I was a kindergarten teacher, I received many students in my classroom who had attended preschool or didn't attend preschool. Many of them had attended preschool, but sadly, they missed out on the linguistic support they needed and they deserved. And it wasn't difficult to determine whether or not they had gotten the services they needed. I mean, we could all do that with a very simple assessment. I would hold something up like this, and I would ask, what color is this? And they would look at me and say, pink. Okay, so then I'd ask, ¿qué color es este? And they'd look at me and they would answer, pink. So that told me that these children were taught English words, but they did not effectively learn their English meaning. And surprisingly, they didn't learn their colors in their own native language either. And so guess what? If they didn't learn their colors, there was a high probability that they had missed many other skills that are typically addressed and taught in preschool. They probably didn't have a chance to sing songs in their native language, or to recite jump rope rhymes, or learn poems in their native language, to read books, or trying to write some books on their own, as sometimes our preschool children do with their inventive spelling. Consequently, I would have to spend almost the entire half of the year undoing some of the learning that they've done in order to get them on track. So since the beginning of my career, I have been advocating to provide certified bilingual teachers in preschools, where there are a significant number of English learners. At times of great need, I've advocated to allow emergency certified teachers to teach in preschool programs to address the needs of our bilingual students. Otherwise, our younger children end up in classrooms where they cannot understand anything that anyone is saying. And this is such a critical foundational preparation point. And so getting it right for our English learners is so critical. And that's not the greatest of introduction to the world of education when you're in a classroom and you can't really relate or participate or really show in your own language, you know, what you want to say and what you want to do. And that's why it's critical for me that we make sure we're providing the research-based, proven, tried and true programming for our English learner students. What that means in the very early years, for me, and I'm a strong believer of this, is using what they bring as an asset, and that's their native language. We all know, and now thanks to the researchers from the University of Chicago that you just heard from, we now have the data to show that this strategy of supporting our youngest children's native language development ultimately prepares them to achieve academic success. And many times, if done correctly, surpass the performance of their English native speakers. So having this proof is so critical because not everyone automatically supports this concept, as many of you who are in the trenches know. For example, many parents, and Rebecca mentioned it, they might feel the urgency for their children to learn English as quickly as possible because they know that that is a key that will open many doors. But they mistakenly believe that full immersion in English without bilingual support is the way to go. Children at this very young age who are still mastering their foundational language need to build a rich, deep vocabulary in their native language first. We talk about that in general when we have children coming in from homes with less resources. That language is the piece that really is impacted. That's true for our English learners as well. And so the native language, the language development in their native language is so critical. And so it might sometimes seem counterintuitive. Immersing them in English only does that. Immersing them in English is the way to go. It doesn't really pay off in the long run. It's a bit like building their academic house on a shaky linguistic foundation. As Latinos, we need to take the lead on this issue. And I know that each and every one of you as educators in the field, and if you're listening to this presentation, you are probably advocates for your English learners. We need to take the lead on this issue. This is the fastest growing population in our schools. and many of whom are low income, and many of whom who come from families with more than their fair share of stress and less than their fair share of opportunity. We can't make up for the lost opportunities, but we can work together to give preschoolers the chance to have teachers who nourish their emerging language skills and prepare them for academic success in the future. Thank you again for your presence at this forum. This is a testament to your interest in the topic and to your dedication and advocacy. I am just so thrilled that I was finally able to cut through the technology web and was able to just be here with you this morning, but also express that as state superintendent, I'm a strong believer in early childhood education. I'm a strong believer in early childhood education for our English learners that make a difference. And so thank you for this opportunity. I'll turn it back over to you, Rebecca.
Dr. Ayala, you saved the day. That was awesome. That was wonderful. We're going to actually move into Q&A. Eric, I'm praying you're able to speak in this lovely world. This is just keeping us on our toes, guys. It's making it exciting. Erica, are you able to speak?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? We are so excited. I've already seen some stellar questions in the chat. I'm going to jump right in. We have a few in here, and now that we have Carmen Ayala on, I just wanted to direct this question to you or anyone else on the panel. Is there anyone to talk at the state level to eventually create more access to dual language programs for English language learners in order to offer them opportunities that develops their native language beyond the 3rd grade?
So one thing I'll mention that's really exciting to me that we have put in place is that we do have native Spanish language arts standards. One of the very first things when I came on board as state superintendent was to have those standards revised. They hadn't been touched in, I don't know, 10, 20 years, I think. And so we now have state-adopted Spanish language arts standards. So that's step one. The second step is we are looking at the potential of a new state assessment. And that state assessment would include a Spanish language arts assessment. And I've said this as bilingual director, as central office administrator, as superintendent. It is an inequity that our English learners are assessed and are labeled, and our schools are determined as performing or not performing on a test that our children truly cannot show what they know and can be able to do. If they are learning in their native language and we value that, we ought to be assessing them in that language and using that data to show the good work occurring in our schools. Now, for a dual language application, wouldn't it be great to have a statewide assessment that is comparable and that you can utilize to see where a child is linguistically in Spanish or in English, and not only for our English learners, but for all of the students that are learning a second language. And so I think that is going to have a big impact on supporting the creation of more dual language schools throughout the state. And I'm so excited.
Thank you, Dr. Ayala. We have another question in the chat related to the study. So Marisa, what % of the sample were Spanish-speaking adults? What additional languages were spoken? And how do you align the educator workforce with the right language repertoires to children?
So in our sample, 85% of the students were Spanish speakers. The 15% remainder spoke 70 different languages across CPS schools. I want to say that the top ones, with more representative students were Arabic, Polish, and probably Cantonese. I can't remember from the top of my head. but there are many different languages represented. And unfortunately, we had some data about certified, whether teachers were certified bilingual or not, but not much information about what language was that. So I don't have much information about the match between teachers and students' languages.
And this is related to teachers and the lack of teachers available for a lot of these services. Somebody in the chat asked, what are some ideas on how to bring bilingual certified preschool teachers to community-based settings?
I think that is a really good question. And I think it's something that has to be made a goal on the onset if we're going to have a mixed delivery system. And if expansion is going to happen across a mixed delivery system, we really have to have a call to action for how not only going to recruit licensed bilingual educators, but how we're going to maintain them in the community-based setting. And it comes down to compensation. These folks need to be paid well, or it's going to be really hard to keep them in the CBO. And so I think there has to be a lot of attention on paying them what they're worth as professionals, because we are asking them to get licensure and to have the endorsement. I think that is critical to having this quality instruction. But if we're not also looking at compensation for folks who bring this specialty to the classroom, I think we're going to have a lot of turnover. And I think this kind of investment and call to action needs to start in the city of Chicago, because it does exemplify a mixed delivery system. But as I know a lot of us here are thinking through expansion statewide, it's critical. We found in our own analysis that 70% of the state's ELs are in about 40 districts. So I really think there's a geographic angle too for how we concentrate on building the future pipeline, but also raising compensation.
Thank you, Rebecca. Marisa, another question about the study. The results weren't disaggregated by program, so does any kind of bilingual support count?
That's a great question. We get that question a lot about differences in the programs. And as you probably all know, there are a dual language setup, but there is also a transitional bilingual program and transitional, I can't remember, TBI and TB. We tried to see whether there were differences. Remember, the study only focused in the early grades all the way to third grade, and we didn't find a whole lot of differences. And we think, but we know that there's a lot of research that supports that points at dual language as being supporting the students better in the long run. And I just think we don't find differences in the early grades. It's too early to see those differences in the early grades.
And one more question. Did you have information about the initial home language proficiency level? Curious about how strongly that correlated, if at all, with initial English proficiency.
We didn't have that information. That's a great question. And I'm excited to hear what Dr. Ayala was saying. Hopefully in the future we have some of that information. We know from other research in other districts that that's highly correlated with success of the students later on, but we didn't have it for this study.
Thank you, Marisa. Those seem to be the questions in the chat box. So I will transition to my colleague Rosario, who will put up a quick poll for all of you to make this a little bit more interactive.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. We have a little activity we want to learn from you, which is why we did this in a meeting format. And so in a moment, you will see the first question pop up, and it's just to get a feel for the room, who's in here. So if you can please fill out the poll, we're going to give a couple of seconds for you to fill it out and then share the responses with everyone to see who's in the room. And then we will proceed with the next few questions. And it is in English and Spanish, and the polling questions will be in English and Spanish. So you should see that in a moment. We'll give it a couple more seconds. I see answers coming in, and then I will close the poll. So thank you for everyone who has participated so far. Okay, great. So are you all ready to see? I am going to share the results. So we have a lot of teachers in the room, administrators, advocates, philanthropists, state agency personnel, parents. Thank you to all the parents who have attended today. We appreciate you. And other, very interesting. So if you identified yourself as other, can you please drop your title or perhaps your role in the chat so we can get a feel for who is in the room? We're going to continue with the second question. And for this question, I know that the options we have provided are hard to choose from, right? We can't just choose one, but if you had to choose one response here, what would you prioritize? So the question is, which of the study findings is the most important for the public to know? And we've given you 4 options here. And at the bottom, you will see this in Spanish. So, por favor, si pueden completar la encuesta, la primera pregunta va a ser en inglés, pero la segunda en español. So la pueden contestar la misma pregunta. And so I will allow for a couple of more seconds while we get the responses in. So we will see what people have chosen for this section. We'll give it a couple more seconds. The responses are coming in. I want to give a moment to allow folks to answer this question. I know this is a hard one. I know responses are still coming in. We're almost there, so please fill it out. Okay, I will go ahead and share the results of those who have answered so far. And so we see a lot of responses for the first one. English learners who attended full day preschool at age 3 performed better than their peers at 3rd grade. So we had a little over half of you prioritize this one. So that's very good to know. Thank you so much for completing that. We're going to move on to the third and final question. And again, I know it's hard to choose one, but if you can, please prioritize one. Which of the policy priorities is the most important for serving young ELs in pre-K? So we'll allow a couple more seconds for the responses to come in. Okay, and I do see that Pedro Martinez has arrived, so I will end this very shortly and hand it back over to him. Okay, great. So most of the responses are for recruitment and retention of licensed bilingual educators. We know this is huge, and definitely feel good about seeing these results and in the way that you guys have answered. So at this moment, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to my colleagues so that they can introduce Rebecca, Pedro Martinez to the floor. Thank you.
So thank you so much. I was unable to unmute. Pedro Martinez, we so appreciate you being here. And I want to apologize for technical difficulties, but this is just keeping us on our toes and making this event exciting. Thank you so much for being here to provide your insights on what this study means for Chicago.
No, absolutely. And actually, I apologize, everybody. I was on a panel that I had to jump on and then come back. But actually, I'm glad that I came back because I've seen the study and I love seeing the survey. And I'll tell you, for me, what's one first of all, when I was here back in Chicago, before I left Chicago, I was overseeing an area of schools, 28 schools, and we had some of the strongest bilingual programs in those schools, and they were on the west side. And one of the things that I saw firsthand even then was how strong our bilingual programs were. So the results that we're seeing in this research are very consistent with what I saw even back then, and that was 12 years ago. And so for me, just to be able to confirm that data, one of the things that we know is that, and frankly, I'll say this, our country did a disservice to us, especially for all of us who are English language learners, making us feel like we were less, making us have this deficit mentality. And what I really appreciate about our bilingual programs, they started correcting that. I will say this though, and I'm going to be very clear. I'm a huge fan of dual language because that finishes the job. I think bilingual is a great start. And what it shows is that we have a great foundation to build from. And in San Antonio, when I got there was only 2 schools that were offering dual language programs. By the way, not necessarily to our English language learners, it was more to my middle class families. And now they have one of the largest dual language programs in the country in 61 schools. And it is now by policy, the program for English language learners. And English language learners are outperforming both the district and even at the state level. And so for me, when I came to Chicago, the first thing I got asked from many of my principals is, can we start a dual language program here? Can we do more dual language programs here in Chicago? And I know that the Latino Policy Forum with many partners have been a big champion for this. And in fact, it's the reason why we even have the schools we have today. So just know that what I love is this research confirms everything that I've known, but what it also does is it gives us it tells me that we have the foundation to get even bolder, to not only continue to strengthen our bilingual programs, but to even go and expand into dual language. And for us to change the mentality once and for all, that again, our children, English language learners, they come with these amazing assets. It is not deficits that they come with, and we can build on that. The other thing that I also have known is that high quality preschool programs on the front end are essential. It is not just a luxury, they are essential. And of course, the reason that it's so difficult to implement both bilingual and dual language programs is you have to have the right staffing. And so having a strong recruitment plan of both attracting teachers and retaining teachers. So I'll give you an example. What I did in my former district is I actually went and helped teachers get their master's degree to become bilingual and dual language teachers. And we actually helped them to do that while they were still teaching in our schools. And so creating programs that really allow teachers that maybe don't have the certifications, but are willing to do that is one. And then of course, making sure we keep them and we attract. And so actually we even changed the compensation system to be able to attract and keep more of our bilingual and dual language teachers. So again, those are just some things that I've seen that work in my former district. I want to try those kind of ideas here in Chicago, but just know, this is one of my passions, and this is one that my principals are already seeing in me, and they're like, okay, all right, let's get ready, let's start doing it. So South Chicago and some of my other neighbors that don't have enough, dual language and bilingual programs, they're the first ones that are saying to me, come on, we're ready now, CEO. So just know more is coming, but I love, thank you for the research. Thank you for this type of work, because it also gives parents the confidence to know that these programs are effective. Because by the way, many of our parents, especially immigrant parents, are still very scared. Well, my child's not going to is not going to know how to speak English. My child's going to fall behind. My child's not going to do well on standardized tests. Those are real concerns that parents have, that we have to make sure that we can show them with research and with results that, look, this is what we know. And this is facts. This is not just opinions, right? These are actual facts. So that's what this research does for us. So again, everybody, I apologize that I had to pop out and pop back in, but I actually love seeing, the fact that seeing the results from the surveys.
Thank you so much. No, it was wonderful that you were able to do it. We so appreciate you being flexible. I'm going to have my CEO and president, Silvia Puente, provide the culminating remarks here.
Well, everyone, just thank you to this amazing partnership that we have with the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research. It's an amazing team at the Latino Policy Forum led by Rebecca. You've seen it on full display. We're so appreciative of Dr. Ayala as our state superintendent, and now Pedro as our new CEO of Chicago Public Schools, not only for partnering with us and being here today, but truly for their lifelong commitment as educators to making sure that there's quality education for all of our children in our state and in our city. What you've seen here on full display is really what we can do with this commitment to research, policy, and practice. We've had this amazing collaboration, as I said, with the University of Chicago. The forum, as you've heard Dr. Vanderlek Navarro express, we are going to be working on the policy implications of this. To all of our friends that are on the call, thank you for being here. We know that our early education system in the state of Illinois really is in a paradigm shift, both at the state level and the city level. We want to make sure, of course, that our English language learners have the supports they need, the teachers they need, as a commitment to quality early education. And we will be working on initiatives to help promote that and bring in more resources to increase the pipeline of the quality educators that we need. But most importantly, as been said, is making sure that our parents understand that bilingual education and their children coming in with Spanish as their first language is an asset that can be built upon, and that we actually see improved education outcomes for our students, as the research says, by second and third grade. So we're encouraged, and we're so thankful to all the parents that are here today. We're encouraged to work with our parents, and most importantly, we're really encouraged to provide quality education for all of our children, really as the foundation to their academic success, to be able to contribute. Now, all this is critically important. It's critically important with what we know is happening with the demographics in our state. As Dr. Ayala said, this is the largest growing student population in our state of Illinois. It's only going to continue to grow, as we've seen 30% or 15% growth of the Latino community in the state of Illinois, and what it means for the overall demographics of our schools. And I'll end with this. We have dedicated officials at the state level, as we've heard from today. We have a dedicated group of individuals at the city level, but most of our students are attending schools in the metropolitan area outside of Chicago, in suburban Chicago. So really making sure that this message to our educators, to our parents, and to our students in suburban communities is critically important, as is making sure that the bilingual programs are there to enable student success. Thank you all very much for your participation today. We have recorded the program. We'll be compiling the polls and sending it to you. Any questions that we weren't able to answer in the chat, we'll get back to you. Really want to thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Have a great day, everybody.